Oh, dachi tashi dele so ane sane kawale oba ina yotane ka ki wodo de wa yago yirawayo.
So first of all, greetings, Tashi Dele, to all Dharma friends. Geshe hopes that wherever you are well, and that you are happy.
ane ta ngaro so tane ya tari loro ga ta ale nika chi ko rumba cha so chi didi chi do saware so or chirwa. ane teri thamati kadungma thamati to ane shinye tese de gogol majare yares.
So Geshe was just explaining that actually, in terms of these Lam Rim, or the stages of the path, at least briefly, we've been able to go through all of the essential points. So we've come to the end of all of those essential points. However, there was one point at the beginning which he had left aside, and that is the way to rely on the virtuous friend, the spiritual teacher, which will be presented now.
ngaro so lojo to nyole kanga lolo se ki wodo kayombo so yak che de isa shinye tese ina yetagares.
So, as with any of the other topics, actually, the study and practice of the Dharma is for our mind to become happy, relaxed, and also vast, to be more broad-minded. And the way to rely upon the spiritual teacher is no exception to this.
다 던지지 자 tene shinye tese ina yo koro le tombi ka le tene kayombo te to kande si yo are. O tse to koro nyole che ke wo zo no to chi ya te ka zanga koro ipoge jiwon de ja chawares.
And so Geshe is just explaining that in the beginning, when we approach this topic about the way to rely upon the virtuous friend, upon the spiritual teacher, as a beginner, right, we want to do this in a way which will allow us to have a vast and calm mind as we approach this topic. And then, as one becomes more advanced, more sophisticated in one's practice, one can incorporate sort of more strenuous approaches to this topic, and Geshe has explained those in many other instances.
다 tenyō shinye tese te ta jīla māshā kaya te tsō chi te kipa tene lo yu to nyole te yar ro wa ina. Ani ya sato lo so so ke jīla sato lo kar she wa ina yo. Ani shomba to niji shonju se kar poke to ba ina yo. Tsō shinye la ani te kipa to shinye la ra li ba te hako ye che ta mazo tamala māshā wa is.
So, in terms of why Geshe decided to actually present this topic of the way to rely on the virtuous friend, the spiritual teacher, at the end of all of the sequence of the Lam Rim meditations, the reason is this. He thought that if people get familiar with the other points, then they will be able to have a little bit a better foundation of study and practice. And then this will help them to understand why it is said that any of the grounds or paths that one achieves, any of the realizations or positive mental qualities like love and compassion that one achieves, all of these can happen only connected with a proper reliance upon the spiritual teacher.
tende chi ta teri ale ya poke le asin jiwo tende ke mambo ja sa wa isa tene ti yan da ti se remote no ro. Ta teri ale go to ne di chi man ro is.
So Geshe said once again that in terms of this topic, it is something that he has explained in a vast and a more detailed way in several of his longer classes. So if you're interested, please listen to those. But today we're going to approach this from the perspective of meditation. And so he'll also be giving a briefer presentation.
Shinye tese nyole che ba ina yongin ju son da wo chi so se le nya ne tene ti to ne poke ko ja ba ina re kar nyole che ba ina do do de wo yares.
So if we approach, right, this way to rely upon the spiritual teacher, how do we do this in the beginning, in the middle, and the end? If we are clear on this, this will be a great assisting factor into our understanding and to our effective meditation. So we'll do this from the approach of meditation, just going through a few of the essential points.
So
we want to have this idea that we are going to make our mind relaxed, and sort of any discursive thoughts or stress, we imagine that these are melted away just like the sun evaporates dewdrops.
ane zo yo anda wo chi to ne sono to ina yo I chi tu ya bo sono to ina yin ya bo ya te ne da le ter ti se me ai sa ane zo yo ate ane tumbe ngo le longen de chama kala te ne 아니 동맹을 때문에 뭐지 사직해서 수박하세 타던 거지 시간 노지 시다스.
So then Geshe said that normally when we approach the meditation session, it's very good to go through the preparatory practices, for example, through the 6 preparatory practices and so forth. However, since this is just a shorter session, we're limited for time. So Geshe would say, as your preparatory practice, imagine that everything dissolves into emptiness. And then from within that sphere of emptiness, imagine a beautiful and vast jeweled ground manifests in front of you.
대내 단에 롱긴 던전 가나 뭐지 사지 뒤에 뛴다. 생계ችን 무제기 되게 뭐지 저야고 시다스.
And then upon that beautiful space of that jeweled ground in front of you, there manifests a throne, also made out of precious substances and held up by 8 snow lions.
뒤에 뛴다. 어떤 롱게 저기在 Lama. 타소소소 같이라 신이 저 가르 이나요 뭐지 스스로 와 이나요. 된 노바 간디지요 바 이나요. 고로 거게. 是吧? 응? 소다도 이도 가르 이나요. 된 뭐지 뭐지. 뭐지 시다스.
Namgingi Nambadiro.
어?
So then we imagine that upon this jeweled throne, in that space in front of us, we invite our root teacher, whoever that virtuous friend is, that teacher is who moves your mind the most, who you see as your main teacher. Imagine them in their everyday aspect, seated upon that teaching throne.
대열 수지 관계 수지 근정 뭐야 맞지.
And imagine that he or she is, in essence, all of the Buddhas, all of the enlightened ones.
대열의 기세 조미가 너무 시레지가 너무 조미고 뭐야 맞지 가서 뜻었어. 손 도토나 드리고 시게 돼서 됐을 때 되고 자야 돼. 그래서
If you imagine that the spiritual teacher, that he or she, in their aspect, encompasses all of the enlightened beings, whether we speak about Tara, whether we speak about Manjushri, and so forth, having this understanding that they are, in essence, all of these enlightened beings, will greatly enhance your practice of the way to rely upon the spiritual teacher.
텔레테는 게 라마시다 아니 라마에도 순지 주세 관계 이거는 주요 보셨습니다. 그래서
And if you like, you can imagine that surrounding this main figure of your spiritual teacher in their aspect, there are the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, all of the other teachers, lineage lamas, and so forth surrounding them.
롱인더네 버섯네 치외 넘반 저바타 사야 주야시 야슈 주주 여바 메도 이름에도 야슈 주주여 치는 쳇소마가 뜻은 우지가 야치와지 가서 뜻을 거야.
And then we can imagine that in the space between that visualization of the spiritual teacher and us, that we fill this with beautiful, uncontaminated offerings. We can imagine all of the most beautiful foods and so forth. If you like, you can imagine beautiful, many, many beautiful flowers in the space in front. You can imagine beautiful, fresh and cooling waters, all in the aspect of, all in essence, uncontaminated nectar.
로마 면달라는 로아리 주의 세진 요주 아니 노바티 메 노바체 대바치미 원이 되어 보스.
And we can imagine that together with us, visualizing, making offerings, and so forth, are all of the 6 types of beings of samsara, but in the aspect of human beings.
요소 주바티 때문에 세계 딘이 이 답안이 아니 와서 왔다 아니라 단다 받은 거로서 때문에 살로 또바 일을 마셔야 돼. 신의 대해서 두바 때문에 마셔왔다. 그때는 대의사다 신의 대해서 두바 못하고지 일하셔와 신절하러지 세네서 하다 해와지.
And so then we imagine that us and the assembled sentient beings make a request, and we make this request understanding that all of the realizations that we have sought, that we have not been able to bring forth, all of the paths and so forth that we have not been able to achieve, part of the obstacles that made us not achieve those was not relying correctly upon the spiritual teacher. So we imagine that ourselves and the assembled sentient beings make requests to the visualized teacher, to the field of merit. Please bless our minds so that we may rely upon the virtuous friend, the spiritual teacher, correctly. And then think today, as my actual practice focusing on the way to rely upon the spiritual teacher, I'm going to rely upon the spiritual teacher purely and in a very stable way. And then in terms of the way to rely upon the spiritual teacher, I am going to rely upon them in two ways. Rely upon them in thought and rely upon them in action. So in terms of the first of these, thought, direct your attention to that visualization of the Lama, of your spiritual teacher, and then gazing at this visualization, think of all of the positive qualities they possess, and use this to bring forth a mind of faith or confidence. So you can think in this way if you like. You could think with this visualized root teacher, when I reflect upon their qualities, they possess wonderfully beneficial qualities of holy body, holy speech, and holy mind. And contemplating those, I rely upon them with faith. And in this way, I understand that they are a perfect spiritual teacher. I can think from the ornament of Mahayana Sutras that they possess the 10 qualities of a spiritual teacher that are mentioned. And because they possess these 10 qualities of a spiritual teacher, they are a worthy, virtuous friend. Contemplate in this way. If we think from the point of view of ethics, we can think that the activities of the body, the speech, and mind of our spiritual teacher are perfectly ethical, and they possess these qualities. Because of this, they are perfectly practicing the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, for example. And then we think similarly in terms of their vows. For example, the pratimoksha, the vows of individual liberation. They are practicing all of those perfectly, and we contemplate their perfect practice of ethics. And in this way, we generate faith.
샤왕에 막 바꿔야 이늘에 샤와 푸스 추가 시드야를 다세 땜발 하나야 그냥 지지 아부서는 또 니가 가리가 바이나 아니 띵엔즈가 라가 땜보여 그 다시에 손을 또네 대화로 시크야레스.
And then we think through completely abandoning negative or unwholesome activities and engaging in perfectly wholesome karmic actions. Then, on this basis, the spiritual teacher is able to refine their practice of single-pointed concentration. And they are perfectly able to practice higher training in concentration. Contemplating this, develop faith in the qualities of the spiritual teacher.
아니 대자실 지시해 바이나레 지근야스다네 차모라 바카라 시바이나 아니 하다야 그냥 뭐지야 이자 시라가 라와 파스 추가도 때문에 또 아침부터 디우스.
And because also the spiritual teacher is able to explain for the benefit of his or her disciples, of his or her students, they are able to explain from the from the very manifest truths of the Dharma to the most subtle and profound topics of the Dharma. And based upon their ability to teach all of these profound and subtle aspects, we develop great respect for their wisdom. And this brings forth faith, training in wisdom.
라바스 조 시베게 대치도 뎀베다 뭐 지가 있었더니 아니 대화로면 바다시와 가로는 세 가제트도 yapıcı.
So what we want to think is, we mentioned those 10 qualities in the ornament of Mahayana Sutras, and in particular, the qualities of the 3 higher trainings in superior ethics, superior concentration, superior wisdom, contemplating how the spiritual teacher possesses all of these. In our meditation, we want to arise a great mind of faith or confidence.
로로 소설 라마 그로에 대대도 뎀바 기고 많이 로로 소설라 아니 리피티셀 야 가디칸디 지시 비토니 가디칸디 지노여 바이나 드릴라 때는 가디 지미 거네 가제 터터트니 리마 유서 와야지 와레스.
And so we want to think about Kondati, younger Sindao.
가디 지미 거네 기바시와 세티니 아니
And so we want to reflect on the spiritual teacher, all of the kindness that they have shown us in the past. And from reflecting upon their great kindness, we also want to use this to contemplate and bring forth a mind of faith.
다시냐 대서 조 자원도 지트 가르제도 있잖아 아니 제제고 그도네 제와시 바이나 다 라미가 요이 대서 뭐야 반은 조 지데 아니 라미가 아니 단절라 임벌레 그야 되더니 라자 조데 대이자다 대 레야 아니 요이 대서 조레는 손에 가는 주데 단절라 임벌레.
And so when we are speaking about the way to rely upon the spiritual teacher, there are many things that we can contemplate. And in terms of one of the most superior qualities that we can contemplate, we think about wanting to serve the Lama in action. And from how we should serve the Lama in action, as a preparation, we thought about all of their positive qualities, relied in thought. The way to rely in action is primarily to follow their instructions and engage in the activities that allow us to take the essence of this precious human rebirth, that allow us to make the precious human rebirth meaningful. And so we want to follow the teacher's advice in our actions, and the way that we do this is based upon our training in the stages of the path of beings of a small and middling capacities. We then engage in the main practice of the great scope, practicing bodhicitta rooted in love and compassion. And so we think that if we are able to do this, then we are able to offer our practices as the best way to please the Lama. There is no better way of pleasing the Lama than doing this. And then because we have pleased the Lama and received their blessings, the Lama is the essence of all of the Buddhas of the 3 times of the past, present, and future. So through receiving the blessings of him or her, we receive the blessings of all of the enlightened beings. And think, if I am able to do this well in this life, then I will create the cause from lifetime to lifetime, all the way up until Buddhahood, to be able to rely perfectly upon the spiritual teacher. So we shall pause the meditation there. So Geshe said that was a really brief presentation, but actually a really nice thing to be able to understand that, one of the ways that we want to serve the spiritual teacher is to develop these minds of love, compassion, and bodhicitta, because in fact, that is the Lama's main advice. If we are able to cultivate according to the Lama's advice and develop these qualities, then we will draw near to the Lama and receive their blessings. And because of the qualities of the Lama, we will also receive the blessings of the Buddhas of the past, present, and future. So that was the brief presentation for today, and then with a happy mind, joyfully, please study and practice as much as possible. Thanks very much.